Welcome back! Thank you so much for clicking on this video. You were probably here because you like to see me edit. Yeah, that's probably what we're gonna do today. I'm gonna walk you through how I edit a photo, and we're gonna look at color grading, split toning, the tone curve, and I'm even gonna show you some tips in Photoshop later on so you get the whole package out of this and you don't have to edit with presets anymore. I mean, presets are great if you just starting out or you want to support your favorite photographer. I think that in the long run, if you want to pursue photography as a career, you really have to learn how to edit. And of course, it's going to help you to develop your own style, to find a style that is unique. If you're a beginner and this is all new to you, then hopefully you will learn something. And if you're a pro already and you're just watching this video for fun, thank you still, and let's jump right to it. So the first thing I always do is I put the exposure up just so I can see more detail. I always like to shoot underexposed, so I just bring the exposure up later to see more details. And the first thing I always do is I bring the temperature down because I like to give it a like blue moody look. And then I'm gonna come here down to the highlights, bring the highlights down so we get the detail back in the sky. Bring the shadows up so we get a little bit more detail out of the shadows. The whites go down so it doesn't look burned out. And the blacks go up to get more details out of the shadows. Clarity I always set at -5. Vibrance goes on -5. Saturation goes on -10. Oh, let's make -5. Should be good. So yeah, that was like the basic adjustments. You can also go on the white balance and tweak it more green or more magenta, but most of the time I just like to leave it as it is. So moving on to the tone curve. This is a very powerful tool and I'm gonna explain it to you in a second. So this space right here represents the shadows, this space right here represents the midtones, and this space right here represents the highlights. So if we're gonna move this around, you can see that it affects the shadows, and if you move this around, it affects the highlights. There's a very simple tone curve that you can do, as the S tone curve is like probably the standard tone curve and it's a good starting point. But one thing I always like to do is I do split the highlights into half and I bring them up a little bit so you get more contrast out of it. And I like to drag this part, I like to drag this part right here up to about here. So you can see you get like a very faded look. And now you need to get the contrast back, and that's all you do is you drag here, you drag it down. Don't go too far, but like just make it as if it's like a, just go to about here. And as you can see, it basically changed your whole image into very interesting color. And now you can go back and change here. You can bring out the shadows again and maybe put the highlights a little bit up. Yeah, that's good. So the next thing I want to show you is there's a tone curve for the colors RGB, so for red, green, and blue. And what I like to do is I do a similar tone curve to the first one, but this one is gonna look a little bit different, because here, as you can see, if you change something, it's just gonna change drastically. So what you do is you just move it up a little bit like that. Then you go into green and you do the same thing, but don't do it blind. Always, like when you're moving it, you have to look at what's happening to your image, so you make sure that it doesn't go crazy. I think that's too much. Yeah. Same thing on the blues. go a little bit more up, and then don't bring it down too much. But yeah, that should be good. And then I like to jump here to the temperature and maybe just adjust this. Yeah, so when we turn off the tone curve, you can see the difference, and this is basically, I think, the thing that affects most of my edits. And I think it's such a powerful tool, and it's really easy to use once you start understanding how it works. And you can always come back and tweak these things to make more contrast, less contrast, but you know, it's really up to you. But I don't really want to go too much in depth, but I hope this explains it more or less what I do. And then coming down to the hues, I always like to have this kind of blue, and then it always depends on the colors and what kind of look I want to achieve. But for now, this is pretty good. Saturation, I like that the yellow of the yellow jacket pops. And then maybe luminance, a little bit up. Yellow maybe a little bit up. Yeah, I think that's pretty good. Saturation, maybe the blues are quite intense already. So moving on, the next thing is split toning. If you don't know what split toning is, it basically adds color to your highlights or your shadows. There's a little trick. If you press down Alt and you move this, you can see that you can get the absolute color. So the saturation is 100% of the color that you're choosing. And you can do the same with the shadows. Press down Alt and you can see it colors. So of course you don't want to have a photo like this, but I think the best thing to do is to, I always like to put blue, like a blue tone like that in the highlights, and then you bring it down really subtle. And in the shadows, I like to have like a orange or yellow, and here as well, like really subtle. And I like to balance it that the shadows are more stronger. And yeah, we could maybe give it a little bit more. Definitely a little bit more. Maybe we should go a little bit. Yeah, there it is. So as you can see, this is too much. Sorry. So that's perfect. The perfect balance of the highlights and the shadows. And as you can see, it makes such a big difference. It just adds a very interesting feeling to it. And I mean, you can choose any of these colors. It's your personal preference, of course. This is just what I think looks best for this photo, so I'm gonna use this. Actually, I do this sometimes, but I think here it's not really necessary. I do add the vignette, but mostly after I cropped it for 4x5. So this is what I crop it for Instagram. Probably needs more sky. And then I add the vignette, and then I like to add a sorry, I lost myself there. I like to add a gradient filter in the sky so that the sky pops a little bit, and here I feel like you can even go a little bit colder. There you go. And now I want to come down here and get into this really quickly. So if you move this, the colors, they change completely, and this is a really great way to get a unique color grading out of it. But I always like to go into the orange and teal kind of look, but really it's really subtle. So maybe like -5. As you can tell, it's the orange just looks more interesting, and then saturation down. Same with the green, it just goes more into this direction. And same here. Yeah. And then I'm gonna come back to the hues and adjust the orange, because I feel like I look like a lobster. Yeah, that's pretty good. So let me show you the before and after. I feel like we can add a little bit more darkness, so I like to add a gradient filter, like a bright gradient filter on top, and then a darker gradient filter with shadows down on the bottom. I just think it always looks really cool. I feel like we could definitely add some more contrast and add up the shadows. You know, at the end it's really just about playing around and like finding what works for you. But I think this is more or less how I edit and how it worked for me. And now I'm gonna jump into Photoshop. So now we're here in Photoshop, and sorry my Photoshop is in German, but I'm still gonna explain you really quickly what I do. So right here, I think this part right there is a bit annoying, so I'm just gonna take it out. So all I do is I select it and it's gone. This is this tool right here, and I come here, I take this out, take this out, take this out. I just like a clean image, so that's the reason I take it out. But that's really the only thing I use Photoshop for, to clean it, and sometimes to adjust colors, but I think here it looks pretty good. Sometimes I feel like I want to recrop it. This is actually really good. There's a few more spots that I like to remove. But yeah, that's basically the end, and I'm gonna show you before and after. Alright, so this is the end of the video. I hope it helped a lot of you guys. Don't forget to subscribe and to follow me on Instagram, and I'm looking forward to post more videos like this. If you have any video suggestions, please let me know in the comments. I'd love to chat with you. And happy August. What is August? Happy summer. Still like, well, there's probably like 2 more months of summer. Thank you so much for watching this video, and I see you on Instagram.